what does it take to become a black belt? Well, I know here and at most schools, you'll go through a process. You'll call it boot camp, black belt trial, candidate practice, some kind of preparation when you know that's your next belt color, where it's time to get really serious and you're going to be put under a more intense stance. Hello, this is James Cox with the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast. We are at episode number 74 today. I want to talk to you about becoming a black belt. Man, we hear it all the time. Black belt, black belt, black belt. People that have never had any martial arts experience, but they pretty much know a black belt is something powerful. It's an accomplishment. It's the Cadillac or the standard or the top. As you do martial arts and as you become a black belt and years or decades later, you definitely see it differently. Now, it's a big thing and it's something that is important and to be very proud of. So a few things to talk about. Is it like, overplayed? Is it just too much about black belt, black belt, black belt as a status? And does that happen where then people become a black belt and they quit? So you kind of see, have we done a good service of pushing people to become black belts? But then they become black belts and quit when we know there's so much more to offer by becoming a black belt and continuing that journey, continuing to train. I would suggest, as a side note, to set the goal of becoming better than a black belt and more than that, maybe a master or grandmaster, and just continuing the training. Or if there was a way to not put the focus on the belt at all, belts don't matter, right? And to just put the focus on the training, the learning, the improving, and even becoming an instructor. So lots of things to talk about with this here, but how do you become a black belt? So most styles, depending on the art that you have, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has white, blue, purple, brown, and black. There's 5 belts total. You'll get into some styles that will have up to 12 belts: white, yellow, orange, purple, blue, green, brown, degrees are brown, red, degrees are red, and then black. But is a red belt or a black belt is a red belt or a brown belt as good as a black belt? That's a hard question to answer because everything is situational, everything is personal, everything is about that person. So you might be a blue belt and you can beat up a black belt. You might be a 0 belt, but it depends on what we're talking about. Are you good at all aspects? And, what's the difference in this person's size and weight and age? But, a black belt should definitely be able to hold their own, defend themselves in above average situations. There's more to being a black belt and doing the martial arts than just fighting, so you got to think about all that as well. But what does it take to become a black belt? Well, I know here and at most schools, you'll go through a process. You'll call it boot camp, black belt trial, candidate practice, some kind of preparation when you know that's your next belt color, where it's time to get really serious and you're going to be put under a more intense stance, test. You're going to be put under sometimes days, weeks, months, years, whatever, of things that you've done, accumulated together to put a show on. So we go through what we call the boot camp, which is a minimum of a 6-month process. And we'll start like in June, and we'll do a belt test in December for people that are eligible to become black belts. It doesn't mean that they all pass. It's definitely something you have to earn and deserve. There's a difference in putting a blue belt or a green belt versus putting a black belt on. And because we know what that standard means, and it's such a big accomplishment, a lot of people start it and don't finish it. So we'll go through a process of a boot camp where we'll meet, a couple of times a week on top of your regular classes that you're doing with some pretty intense training. And there has to be a checklist of a curriculum, pass and fail stuff, right? Starting with fitness, how do you gauge and test your overall fitness? Maybe you have a time limit in running a few miles. We have a fitness challenge where you have to do 100 jumping jacks, 25 push-ups, 25 squats, and 25 crunches 3 ways. You have to do 3 sets of that, which is pretty hard, under 10 minutes, all right? And that's a requirement, before you get your black belt. We've done some other fitness challenges and things to do. If you have a set of curriculum drills, you need to be very well-versed on how to defend yourself against grabs, punches, knives, guns, weapons, multiple attacks, just basic understanding of what makes self-defense work. How do you apply the techniques that you've learned through the years and the places that you hit, the weapons you hit with. Are you able to drill this on a person and, a somewhat live, realistic situation? You need to know how to do some sparring. I don't think becoming a black belt without some sort of physical sparring. It doesn't have to be full contact. It can be light sparring. Maybe there's injuries that we have to work around or limitations, but sparring. And they're sparring in several ways, depending on what you're getting a black belt in. If it's a mixed martial art type style, then you should be able to spar like an MMA fighter in ways. You should be able to stand up and do your kickboxing, go to the ground and do your jiu-jitsu, and then just, use that sparring also as a physical fitness test. Because you might think you're in pretty good shape until you try to go 5 3-minute rounds, 10 2-minute rounds with different people as well. Because different people will help you in different ways and also test you and push you in different ways. I think besides your fitness, your self-defense, your fighting, to become a good black belt, you should have some education in the history of the martial arts. Not just the martial arts style that you come from, your origin, your background, but you should also have some history of other martial arts styles. Because isn't it important to understand what you do and to be able to communicate, what's the difference in karate and judo and Kempo and kung fu or whatever else it might be. These make a well-rounded, complete martial artist, I think, as well as there's something to becoming a black belt and becoming a better person. What are your morals and your ethics and, your honesty and your leadership, values that you live by, the tenets of the martial arts, if you will. So we recite a lot of this with our creeds and our oaths and our pledges. And I think to become a black belt, you need to truly be a good-hearted person, if that makes sense, right? We don't want someone wearing a martial arts black belt. It's like the superhero cape that's going to use it in a bad way, that's going to use it for evil, right? So a good martial artist should be a good person. Heck, a lot of times you can't even tell that a person's a martial artist in ways because they're not out there with a need of feeling that they have to prove themselves, right? A lot of times they're quiet, but they're very confident, so you can see the confidence of a person that's a martial artist. Becoming a martial artist, you should have some leadership. I like for my black belts to have some sort of teaching abilities. This is to help them articulate what they know, and it also gives a chance for them to give back. And heck, if you've gotten a black belt, that's like having a degree, so you might as well have that knowledge that you can use if it's to become an assistant instructor, an instructor yourself, and just spread the word of the martial arts to the world. So put some thought into what it takes to become a black belt. What is a black belt? There's some philosophies of what even the colors are. White belt starting from the very beginning in the bottom, it's the innocence and that's the purity. And then as you train, you get the blood, sweat, and tears. You get deeper knowledge and history with what you have. Through all those experiences, your belts get darker. You become a black belt. And that's the death or the rebirth, but that's where now you're able to give back and really start learning. There's a lot more after black belt. I say that every year I feel that I've learned more than I probably learned all those years previously by staying with it. There's an accomplishment in getting the black belt, but man, there sure is a lot more after. So I would encourage you, push for that goal, goals you set or goals you get, but don't stop when you get it. Become more than a black belt and you just become more of a better person for yourself and for others. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you. Keep following the podcast as well as our YouTube channel, James Cox Martial Arts.